Let's say I'm a startup founder and they all push me in the direction of, well, you should protect your IP.
For local government grant, I'll speak in general terms. The approval rate is about 2 to 10%.
So I found your organization. How does that work?
It takes about 4 to 5 minutes to apply for a grant. We have about an 80% approval rate.
Why is the success rate so different?
Startups don't have time or money, as much of each as they would like. The first thing the startups need is
Welcome to a new episode of Talk IP to Me, where we sit down with IP professionals, founders, and legal minds to share stories behind the work, some practical lessons, and basically the shifts that are shaping the future of patents and IP. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Adam Fox. Adam, welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, David, for having me. Really appreciate it.
For those of the listeners who don't know you yet, please give us a few sentences on how you got into IP.
My background is in psychology, not so IP related. I fell into IP with a company called Morningside. They're now owned by Questel. They're one of the biggest service providers in the intellectual property space. I was just initially an account manager for startups and law firms, helping them with their IP. Over several years, became the CEO of Questel's Morningside in Germany. Then we founded FundingIP, and that's entirely different funding and supporting startups with grants.
You come from basically a psychology background and counseling, and now you're very deep in IP and funding companies in IP. What's the story there?
That's a good question. Maybe part of it, my focus in psychology was on cross-cultural backgrounds, social psychology. IP is very much a global thing where there's a lot of filings in different jurisdictions and attorneys from different jurisdictions with their own different customs and filing regulations, etc. So there's a lot of cross-culture in IP as well as psychology. So there is a link there.
So let's say I'm a startup founder doing something with, let's say, semiconductors. I don't know whether my invention can be protected or not, but there are potential investors interested in working with me, and they all push me in the direction of, well, you should protect your IP. So I found your organization. How does that work? What's the process there?
So the process is quite simple. That's everything about what we do is about simplicity. Startups don't have time or money, as much of each as they would like, anyhow. And so the first step is they would apply for a grant. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes to apply for a grant online. And we give approvals within 5 days. Normally it's about 2 days, but within 5 days. So it's very fast, okay? And we have about an 80% approval rate. So really, as long as the startup is a genuine startup, and as long as they potentially have IP, some people say maybe applying for a grant to get a fridge or an office or something, and we don't provide grants like that. So we just got to make sure that they really do want to protect their IP, which most of the time is the case. And then the first thing the startups need is to find that attorney that is specialized in their niche technology area. So if you say semiconductors, the first point of call is would need to find them, help support them in finding an attorney that is specialized in that niche area. So finding that attorney that can understand what the startup's technology is rooted in is fundamental for making sure that that startup gets sound advice from attorneys, right? And I think in addition to the technology competency or specialization of that attorney, also that's really important for the startup is having the attorney in the right jurisdiction. Okay, and that could either be in the local jurisdiction of the startup. So if you're, for example, sitting in Denmark, right, David? Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So if you're a startup in Denmark, and maybe you're in Copenhagen, for you, you just want to have an attorney specialized in semiconductors in Copenhagen. So we'll start with your needs, right? But after speaking a little further with you, we may find that even though you're in Copenhagen, the US market is the most important for your invention. So you might appreciate meeting a semiconductor specialized attorney in the US. It might be a part of the US that interests you the most, so East Coast, West Coast, etc. So we really follow the startup's needs. You might want both. You might want to meet someone in Copenhagen and the US. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So just so I get this right, I apply. There is usually an 80% success rate with that application. Then you help me match with an attorney with geographically and industry-wise sort of a match for where I am, right?
exactly.
Um, and I can do this basically from anywhere around the world, or do I need to be in a specific country to be able to get this grant?
You can be in anywhere you like, as long as it's planet Earth, anywhere you like.
Okay, okay.
So we are headquartered in the UK, but I'd say 90% of startups that apply are on planet Earth, anywhere in the
Okay,
world. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Okay, that also makes sense because you describe your company as a global nonprofit, right? Um,
exactly.
so then let's say I get matched with an attorney in the US because that's where my commercial target market will be, and that's what I want to also focus on. So what happens next?
Okay, so yes, we've found you the perfect attorney you would like. So we then ask the attorney to perform a conflict of interest check, which is standard in the industry, and that's just to make sure that they can service you,
Mhm.
right? Um, we'll show you who that attorney is also, so you make sure yes they're the perfect attorney for you. We've got to make sure that the attorney now can take you on as a client because they may have another semiconductor client, for example, and that attorney needs to just make sure that there's no conflict of interest for you and their existing client, right? So we take care of all of that so you don't have to go through that conflict of interest check process. And the other part we do is we help you set that what's called an IP strategy session. That's an online meeting if you're in Copenhagen and they're in the US, or you can fly there if you want, but most probable you'll want a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting, whatever you like. And we coordinate that first meeting for you with the attorney. Okay. Um, that's fully reimbursed, the IP strategy session for
Mhm.
you with that US attorney. It's a 90-minute sit down, and it's not a just limited to an introduction session, okay, like getting to know each other, um, because you're paying the attorney for that IP strategy session, and you're getting that completely reimbursed back to you by Funding IP. But because you're paying and engaging that attorney and not asking them to give you advice for free, they're really invested into giving you the advice you need. Okay.
Okay.
Your questions that you'll have of the attorney are going to be very different depending on what type of startup you are and what your needs are. Um, so, for example, you might just want to know: should I protect my idea with patents, designs? How many patents? What kind of strategy should I adopt when you're drafting the patents for me? What jurisdictional cover should I? What filing route should I take? PCT, Paris Convention, etc. Um, so you're going to have many questions. Licensing agreements. Maybe you have a contentious case. Maybe a case that you're wondering: should I litigate or should I something related to that area? So you might just want to talk to them about a
Okay.
contentious IP issue also. So you're free at your disposal to use that session with the attorney as in the best way possible to make sure you get the most out of it.
Okay. but let me just get this right. So even if I don't end up working with that attorney, that session will get reimbursed. Would that be fair?
That would be very fair to say. Yes, you're
Okay.
free to end the engagement after the session with that attorney or continue. We're actually not involved because it's a client-attorney privilege relationship for you and that attorney. So you're free completely to end it or continue.
Okay. Okay. And then let's say, my startup is very small. Of course, I'm very, trying to be efficient, especially with the budget. But I want to create that patent. I really want to create the asset. Um, so what happens then? Let's say there is no conflict of interest. I pass the check. Let's say now we can work together with that US-based attorney. Then what is the next step?
Okay, so the attorney will lead you down the next steps, which we're not involved in, but typically, that may include, for example, drafting a new patent. That attorney will help you with that process. This is, of course, after you've completed perhaps a search and things like that. And you've agreed with your attorney on the strategy for protecting your IP. So that might start with drafting and filing a patent application in the US, for example. It might be a provisional application, a full application. Every jurisdiction has their own
Yeah.
nuances. I'm not a patent attorney, just for full transparency. I've just been in the industry for a while, so know these terms, but really the attorney's the one to hold your hand and explain the pros and cons of all the routes that you can take to gain your protection. And then after you've drafted that patent and filed it, um, you would be picking out the foreign jurisdictions that you want to gain protection in also. And the attorney will lead you down that route. Typically, attorneys these days use service providers to handle patent foreign filing and translation, both for reasons related to quality and cost. In former times, it was more typical for law firms to use foreign agents, which are like law firms in foreign jurisdictions, and there's that some still very much do that today, but most use service providers to reduce costs for their clients and increase quality as service providers. That's all they do, handle foreign filing translations. And then it's about keeping the patent alive and renewal providers, etc.
Sure.
Great
Yeah.
ones like patent renewals, but I'm sure we all know that, patentrenewals.com. Have you heard of them before?
Yeah. So just coming back to what happens after I pass that 90-minute sit down and get reimbursed. So from that point onward, I make my own decision whether to work with the attorney or not. But you won't be included afterwards in this process, right?
Correct. Yes. The only so after the IP strategy grant that you would receive from FundingIP, we have at least another two other grants that
Okay.
are available for you. So as a second grant that you're entitled to apply for is a filing grant.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it covers the foreign attorneys' professional fees for filing your patent in a foreign jurisdiction. Okay, so we've designed that filing grant really to help startups afford to protect in a jurisdiction outside of where they first file in. So if you're in Denmark, then it would apply to the United States, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very helpful because mostly, not always, but mostly startups want to do at least one jurisdiction beyond where they are. So that's been very helpful. So that's another grant we can support you with. And we have other grants too, innovation grants, they're called. And that's after it's done about every quarter or based on budget and And that's selected, those winners are selected by a panel of attorneys and startup networks, and they're picking really startups that for their own in their own perception they really believe in and want to support, and FundingIP obviously wants to support them too. So that panel helps us select the winners, and that can be a lot higher, the amount that we give grants to there. I think the most we've given is around 35,000 euros for one starter. They're not all going to be that amount, but I'm just to give you an idea of what it can go up to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the actual amounts. Because as I understand, there is the 90-minute sit down. That's sort of the base grant or the first grant. Is there a maximum that for that grant, or how does the calculation for that work?
Yeah. So for the 90-minute sit down in the United States, for example, if that's where you want to meet an attorney, so you would pay the attorney $1,000 in their currency. You'd have the sit down, and then FundingIP would reimburse you within 30 days. If you wanted an attorney, for example, in Germany, so you would pay the attorney €1,000, have the sit down, and then be reimbursed by FundingIP within 30 days, €1,000. So
Makes sense.
you get the entire money back. The only difference is the currency of the attorney that you're meeting.
Okay, fantastic. So then let's say I have that meeting, I follow with the grant for filing. So as I understood, this is only for the professional fees, right? So not for the actual filing fees that are due at the PTOs or patent and trademark offices. But of course, those vary, right?
Yeah, so you're talking now, correct. You're talking now about the filing grant,
Fine.
right? Second grant. Yes, and you're completely right. The filing grant doesn't cover official fees, patent and trademark official fees. You can think of them as taxes or whatever. And yeah, it only covers, correct, the attorney professional fees for the initial filing of that application. Yeah.
Give me an example of how what that range is that someone could save on those fees.
Yeah, so our grant covers up to $2,000 or euros or pounds if you're going into the UK, and very few attorneys charge more than that.
And then what is the innovation grant? I'm sorry, I might have not understood that. This probably because it can be so many different
Yes,
use cases,
correct.
right? So
We're evolving. Yeah, the grants are evolving. Like we're adding on new grants all the time based on the feedback from startups. But yeah, the three grants are the IP strategy grant. That's the 90-minute one. The filing grant we've discussed, and the last one is the innovation grant selected by the panel.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the innovation grant?
Okay.
What are the decision criteria for the panel?
Yeah, so we really leave it up to the panel. FundingIP is more there to facilitate the panel, which includes the attorneys and the startup networks that the startups normally apply for grants through, right? So we leave
Yeah.
we leave these selection criteria up to them because patent attorneys, know the IP value of startups better than us, right? And probably better than some startup networks, right? From a legal perspective. And the startup networks know the startups intimately for a different reason, right? For maybe the value of the startup itself. And so they have different objectives of evaluating a startup and who should be a winner and the criteria for selecting the winners. So we leave it up to them to decide, and
Okay.
that can change. But generally, the attorneys and the startup networks share common ground in they just want to have the greatest impact of FundingIP's grants. They want to see the greatest impact for startups. So they're picking out who will benefit the most and who has a chance potentially, for example, to become a unicorn and things like that.
Going back to, all of the three different grants, you also mentioned that for the first grant, there is probably an 80% success rate. And then I assume there are also rejections for the other grants too. What are the most common reasons for startups or founders or inventors not getting the grant?
So the most common, it happens very little, like, about 20% of applicants would not get a grant. Most often it's that the startup has applied and then are no longer contactable. Maybe they're not running with their business anymore, right? That's a common thing. Maybe they applied to get patent protection and then they're discovered during the application, oh, maybe I don't want that anymore, or trademark protection, or I don't want a name anymore for my, things like that. So that's why it doesn't happen too often. It happens even less often if the startup applied through a startup network,
Mhm.
because so it doesn't happen too often, but they're the types of reasons
Sure.
that they would be
How?
rejected or
Yeah. So let's say I applied. I know I want to get it. I know I will not turn back. How long do I have to wait before I find out that I got the grant or not?
maximum 5 days.
Maximum 5 days. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. That's fantastic. In my personal experience, it's just so important to find the right attorney because then you tend to stay with them for quite a long time, right?
yeah,
So how do you help these founders and people to actually be matched with the right attorney who might be, an expert at their field or at the niche, but there has to be also a psychological match. There has to be some sort of, you know,
yeah. Absolutely,
match to understand each other a lot better.
absolutely. Yeah, so we're talking about here startups that don't yet have an attorney.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, which is most of the applicants that apply for our grants. Okay, not all, but most. If they have an attorney, just to be clear, we don't encourage them at all to change. We actually do the opposite. We actually suggest if they've already got an attorney and they're happy with that attorney, it's better to stay. Even when they ask us for a new attorney, we actually question it and say, "Are you sure? Like, you've got an attorney, they already have invested time in understanding your IP. It's better to stay with them."
Yeah.
It's just a policy we have. But most need a new attorney. How do we do that? So mostly we defer to one of our sponsors, Insperanto. They're our flagship sponsor. For full transparency, I'm also the CEO of Insperanto, and Insperanto has a network of about 2,000 plus attorneys worldwide, and within that network, Insperanto has classified all the attorneys based on fields of technology and a whole series of data points that are interesting for startups. So fields of speciality, jurisdiction we've discussed, and other preferences that startups may have. So when that allows Insperanto, when picking out and matching an attorney, to to make a really good match. The success rate in the matches are at least 95%
Oh,
the time. Yeah, very high. And remember that we would always, when suggesting the match to you, we'd always ask you, we'd provide you the background and the reason why the match was made. You always have an opportunity to say, no, don't like them, suggest another, and no problem, that can be done. But it's usually 95% plus a good match.
wow. And in your experience, do they also stay with the attorney after perhaps the first filing?
Yeah, so of the startups that we do match to an attorney, yeah, by large, most do stay. Yeah.
let's say that, my startup is still very much in the bootstrapping phase, and I also want to save on the actual filing fees. Do you know about any perhaps government support or any grants that could be available either through you or someone else to also push those fees down, potentially for the first filing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of startups can and should look in wherever they're located for local government grant subsidies, reimbursements. Um, every jurisdiction has their own. I'll speak in general terms on what's sort of available per, like on a global scale. So generally, firstly, in terms of the amounts, it's quite wide and varied. But when we're talking about specifically IP, patent, trademark protection, the amount of reimbursements that are available to you, depending on your jurisdiction, is somewhere between 1 to 16,000 euros. That's the average, okay?
Yeah.
Um, and the amount of effort it would require you to typically apply for one of those government grants, from our research, is about typically 20 to 60 hours, which sounds a lot, on average, to put together all the material that you will need to get approval for that grant. The amount of time that these government grant bodies will take to approve the grant for you is about 30 to 90 days. And the approval rate is about 2 to 10%. I don't
Wow.
want to single out which country because I don't want to make any country look better or worse than the other, but it's about 2 to 10%. Yeah, which makes our grants quite interesting. 80%, big difference. And then once they've been approved for the grant, if they're lucky enough, then they'll get paid the reimbursement. It's typically a reimbursement also, and that's typically about 30 to 300 days they'll get reimbursed in. Yeah.
Adam, that's so gold, what you're talking about. So help me understand, why is the success rate so different? Is that because of the number of applicants is so different, or what makes those, government grants to have only 2 to 10% success rate?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, to tell you the truth. I can
Yeah.
guess. And my guess is that, yes, they get a lot of applicants. And my other guess is that they want to make sure that their investment is spent wisely, right?
Mm,
Um, so some grants require, for example, a search to be completed, a patent search to first be completed before they'll even consider awarding you a grant.
okay.
Um, just as an example, um, I think it really comes down to they want to be able to show the result of their funding. And so that's probably why they have a lot of red tape to get
Yeah.
through. Yeah, for a good reason, I guess. Want to make sure that the money goes to a good place. So
Of course, of course. So just to sort of round up the topic of grants, in general, of course, this is not for a specific scenario, but if a founder has a limited time and brain space, which type of grant should they choose? What should they do if they think they have a great invention that they could potentially patent or create a design or trademark on it? Which way do you recommend them
yeah,
to go? That's the
I have
most efficient.
great. So I think most of the startups that apply for our grants are also applying for another grant as well. Our grants are best to apply for if the startup wants immediate support to get an attorney, and an immediate support to get paid a grant. It takes us 30 days to reimburse the startup, so it's much faster. It takes 5 minutes to apply from FundingIP, and once they're awarded, 30 days to receive our funds. So it's applying for a grant from FundingIP is really suited to any startup, and I think they should do that in parallel to looking in their local grant offers as well that might be available and relevant for their IP. If a startup needs money and it wants to raise money to help them protect IP, then I really would recommend doing that little bit of research, getting the FundingIP's grant to support them immediately, and then in parallel, doing some research in their local jurisdiction to see if they can find another grant to complement their needs. And FundingIP is happy to help them research that or give them a direction of where to go if they need.
So we do have in this podcast series a section that we call rapid fire IP confessions. That is just very, very short questions that require very short, top of mind answers from you.
Let's have a go. Sure.
Okay. What's the most common myth about IP funding?
That there is a catch, or that it's too good to be true, or there's no free lunch.
What's the most creative way you have seen someone try and save money on IP?
They've done research, which I recommend everyone should do. They've done research on finding ways to protect their IP, to reduce costs, just researching it. A little research goes a long way to reducing costs. Don't take just one advice, I would suggest.
I love that. Where do funders overspend in IP?
Okay, for sure, in foreign filing and specifically translations of their patents.
Okay, the last one. One thing you would fix about government grants?
Make it much faster for startups to apply for grants.
Okay, fantastic. The very last question is coming from our last guest, who wanted to know what is your favorite IP? What type of IP you like the most to deal with?
Yeah, my personal favorite is patent foreign filing and translation. I love it because literally every jurisdiction has its own set of laws and approaches to interpreting and protecting IP assets. And they all also belong to some kind of treaty, whether that's the PCT or Paris Convention Treaty. So they all have their own unique differences, and they also share something in common too. So that's my personal favorite, the patent foreign filing space.
Sounds like you like languages and very complex things.
Absolutely.
I love that. Adam, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining. I genuinely am thankful for everything that you've shared. And I really hope that people out there will listen and they will take either the grants from FundingIP or government grants and will try and act a lot more on their IP strategy. Thank you so much. And before we end the call, any last ideas or suggestions you would like to share?
Yeah, well, thank you, David, for having me. Really appreciate it. And, last words, I think just for startups that it's tough for any startup. That's normal, and very challenging. That's normal. So the very least we can do is support startups in any way we can. And I'm really grateful to you, David, for putting out this message of how we can help support startups, and anything we can do to help them is just going to be good for everyone. So thank you, startups, for being startups as well. Like without you, we have no industry. So yeah.
Fantastic. And for those listeners who want to immediately act after this, where is the best way to find you online?
Yeah, just fundingip.com, and the 5-minute application form is there. Very welcome to complete it and hopefully get a grant.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks again for being here. And for everyone else listening, thanks for tuning in to Talk IP to me again. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with your colleague or friend in IP or not in IP, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, David.